Welcome down to the Upstate. I'm Mari.
And I am Matthew.
And we want to apologize for our long absence. We've had major technical issues, and we even still have a major technical issue, but we are forging ahead. And sorry about that. And that's going to be one of our problems, folks, is the computer we used, which was my computer, it's not dead, but it's zombied. It's the main one we use for audio editing. So the next few episodes are going to be very raw. We can't go in there and edit all the ums and the ahs and mistakes. So you might hear us pause more than usual, and I want to pre-apologize for that. If you're curious what has happened, in a nutshell, technical issues, then life issues, technical issues. And it just got snowballed from there. So that's it in a nutshell. But if anybody wants to assist with getting a computer that we can do audio editing on, make sure it's more than 15 years old, because that was the computer I was working on. All right, for you technical people who are wondering what happened.
Right.
I usually run older computers because I'm just that type of person. I kind of like the challenge of running older computers, as long as I can get what I need to done. And I'm not a gamer or anything, so I don't need top-of-the-line stuff. And I've been running this one computer, which I bought used, for about 6-7 years now. And I've been running Linux off of it, no problem. Been able to do what I needed to do. Been able to do work and everything. And there was a major update to the Linux I use. Put it in there, usually no problem updating Linux. Put it into my computer, and there was a problem. It would load up the desktop, and then the hard drive would start running to the point where it would freeze up the computer. I finally was able to get in there doing some finagling with the terminal. Those of you in Linux know what I'm talking about. I had to go in there and do a sudo and bring up a hardware monitoring thing, and found out that the only hardware issue I had was my BIOS was old. Now, there's a simple solution to it, simple but kind of nerve-wracking, is that I have to flash the BIOS and make it new, update it. Problem is, this BIOS is 15 years old. And is it really worth saving? So right now I'm trying to decide, do I buy myself a whole new desktop, or do I just rip the motherboard and power out of the form factor I have here, and put a whole new motherboard and power into it, and hopefully everything else will be compatible. So that's where we are now. So we're recording directly off my cell phone, and we won't be able to edit much out. So hopefully we won't bore you guys. All right. So that's the long and short of it.
As far as upgrading your old system, it's all SATA.
Yeah.
So I don't see a problem. If it was ribbon, it'd be impossible.
Right.
You wouldn't be able to work with it at all.
So I just got to decide, am I going to spend the money and get a whole new desktop, or if I'm just going to...
Well, that's the beauty of buying the old units.
Yeah.
For this purpose.
Yeah,
and
that's true.
Once you find an alternative, then maybe you could flash the BIOS, then get that on a thumb drive, and then...
If it's more than 15 years old, I don't think I'd have to worry about it. It's just this thing is so old. But I got it to work, we've been able to keep it working, and otherwise...
Well, that's the fun thing about the old units,
Yeah.
doing that stuff with them.
Okay, well, that's enough about my computer woes. We should probably discuss what we're going to do this month, since it is October.
Yeah.
And we decided to come back with a bang. So we've picked 4 interesting stories to cover this month. And just to give you a glimpse into what's coming up, I'm just going to vaguely tell you what they're about. We have one about we actually are talking about 2 towns for 2 different reasons coming in the next couple of weeks. We're going to be talking about a grave,
right,
of somebody who was quite infamous, or might be quite infamous, depending on how you take it. And we're going to be talking about this one place in the southwestern part of New York, which we haven't talked about too much, and all the interesting ghost stories and weird things that happened in this one area, that I think maybe we should jump on the chance and maybe do our own, 411 out of it, except that there haven't been too many deaths, but the ones I have found in that particular are pretty horrific. So we are going to start with one of the towns, and we are going to be talking about a ghost town.
Mm-hmm.
And a ghost town in New York, that must sound pretty odd to some people.
Not many ghost towns in New York left.
Mm-hmm. No, I think
New York State.
when I was doing the research, I think I found a list of 10 possible ones. I mean, we talked about Happy Valley before, which technically is a ghost town, even though there's only a couple things left there.
Which we drove by the other day.
Yes, we did. Yeah, it was totally unplanned. We just suddenly realized, wait a minute, that's how we do Happy Valley.
That's the road to Happy Valley, by golly.
And yesterday we drove down the road. Well, one of our first episodes we talked about that killer, and yesterday we just happened to be driving down that road.
Potato Hill Road.
Yeah. So, that was interesting. It's easy to get to these spots, and this one is easy to get to. In fact, it's easier to get to it now than when it was a town. It's
as illustrated by one of the stories we have to relate to you.
Yes.
That involves
President
Roosevelt.
Yeah, President Roosevelt. Okay, well at that time, Vice President.
Vice President.
And the town we're talking about is Tahawus, and I really hope I pronounced it right.
Tahawus?
Tahawus. If you look at it, you might think it's called Tahawus, but it's Tahawus, New York.
Right.
And that actually is not its first name. We're going to find out this town had many, many different lives. So anyway, how this town began was they found iron.
Mm-hmm.
Now this is up in the Adirondacks. This is up in the High Peaks area, as it's known. And there is mining, or there had been a lot of mining, and that's our producer Lloyd making noise. Sorry about that. He's being a cat.
Yep, iron deposits were found in that area near Tawas back in 1826.
Yes.
By Archibald Mcintyre and David Henderson. Yep, and the ore was extracted by a company known as the Upper Works. Was it?
It was.
It was. The iron was extracted at what was known as the Upper Works.
Right.
Yeah.
It was the Adirondack Iron Works, which actually led to the name of the town being Adirondack without the K. So originally, it was Adirondack, and then by the Adirondacks Iron Works, and
well, the Upper Works met with some success. Between 1827, 1857.
It was the best iron.
Right.
It was the best iron that was being produced at the time, so it was really sought after. Yeah.
Interesting, because at this same time, they were mining anthracite in Pennsylvania around Scranton.
Oh, that's right. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that was some of the best coal ever. It's better than just regular coal.
Now this iron was good, but there was a problem with it. It was there was a mineral that was in the iron that did make it kind of difficult to refine.
Okay.
And that iron was the titanium dioxide. Now, it didn't make it impossible to refine, but it did make it difficult. And of course, as they got used up more and more of the pure layers of iron, they had to get the mixed iron, and it became difficult to work with. But they were doing 12 to 14 tons a day extracting it, and then taking it down to the Adirondack Iron Company. The town had about 400 men that were employees of the company living there. So it was a good sized town. It was a good sized company. I mean, 400 people working were there.
Yeah, it certainly was at the beginning. It operated 2 farms, and the blast furnace and forge, a puddle furnace, charcoal and brick kilns, trip hammers, and a grist mill.
Yep, and the village...
And a sawmill, too.
Yeah. And the village also had a school and a church and a general assembly room. So they really...
Consisting of 16 dwellings.
Yep, yeah, it was a really good-sized town for the time. And, like I said, the iron that was coming out of it, it was... The Adirondack would get $40 to $45 per ton, whereas like the typical pig iron was getting $20 to $22 a ton. So this was really sought after iron at this time. So, and it also became the first place that had a organized state bank in New York State as well. And it was called the Mcintyre Bank, named after one of the guys who
One of the
founded the
founders,
company.
yep.
Yes. Of course, the railroad company had to get up there to help take the iron out. So this is really a prosperous place at this point in the history.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, it's quite a thriving iron ore town here.
Yes, yeah. And they, it got really good. It really was going well. They put a whole new blast furnace in there, which was one of the largest made at the time.
And once the railroad really started getting going, railroad development.
Yeah. Now,
at this point was pretty small,
but
they still got rails built out to Tahawus in order to move the ore,
which was impressive. Those of you who have no idea what we're talking about, the High Peaks area in that. We were just up in the Adirondacks yesterday, and I am sorry about my phone. And we were on the western side. We were up by Old Forge, and it was packed.
Yeah.
It was busy, and I did say as we're driving around 28, I kind of expected more wilderness, and then got totally put in my place because I think at that point is when you turned around the corner and there's 2 deer, right in the middle, by this road, and we're like right outside Old Forge at that point.
Oh yeah.
Point.
Yeah.
We went and did our touristy thing, and even while we're in Old Forge, guess what? We see another deer, actually 2 deer. And
it was a doe and her baby.
Yeah, in town.
That had just lost its spots.
In town.
Mama, yes, in town.
Yeah, it was
and
right
Mama
off
was
the street.
Like behind a building on an access road, and she was laying down by one of the fences.
Right.
Trying her best to conceal herself while she laid down. And
while her baby was running around checking out the humans.
But then one of their dogs, somebody's dog, tried getting fresh with the fawn, and then that was it.
Yeah.
ran
back to Mama. But that just gives you an example. I'm like, I see all these cabins, and I see everything, and I'm like, oh, this isn't a wilderness. And then those 2 things hit you, and it's like,
you got reminded.
Yeah. If I go 50 feet off this road, I'm in a forest. I am, I am in the wilds.
The real woods.
And so it might not seem that big of a deal, but that's how quickly you get into the woods up in the Adirondacks. It's there's a lot of places that are developed, and it's definitely touristy in some areas, like Old Forge definitely was yesterday. Yeah. But at the same token, like I said, if we would have stopped at any of those trailheads on the way home, 50 feet into those trailheads, we wouldn't even noticed.
Yeah,
that we're in the middle of this big tourist area. So, yeah, it's even though some of the trailheads on the eastern side have been so packed that it's nearly impossible to get to the trails now.
Exactly.
So it is. There is a lot more infrastructure there now, but it's still pretty wild. Now, back up to the 1840s, and you get you're bushwhacking to get a railroad up there.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so you're looking at a totally different situation, but it's still difficult. I mean, in order for us to get to the eastern side, like let's say we want to check this place out, it's a 4-hour trip because we got to go around the mountains to get to it.
Isn't there the Tug Hill Plateau there? And
we're on the Tug Hill Plateau and we're on the western side. That doesn't take long. But if we had kept continuing down 28 and say we wanted to get to Newcomb, which is next to Tahawus, sorry, I know I mispronounced that. That would have been another 2 hours. Because of how we have to go around everything. If it wasn't for the mountains and it wasn't for the wilderness, it would probably be like an hour.
Yeah, if you could take it as the crow flies.
But, I just want to set the tone that it's still, even today, it is still difficult to get around in some of those areas, even though they're very well traveled. And coming back.
We're circling it back around, but it's just to give you an idea how completely wild it is. And it's very difficult to get a rail up there because rail works best on flat ground, on a flat grade. And they have to finagle the rail so that the train can get up there and take care of all the materials down to where it can be transported from there. Yeah. Many transportation points, many gathering points for the ore in order to get it to market.
Yeah.
And so,
So a lot of the stuff was coming up from Albany or was coming over from Lake Champlain on very primitive roads and very primitive railroad beds at that time. There's still a lot of railroad beds up there.
Yeah.
I mean, like we said with Old Forge, we even got to see the old train, which kind of, that train station
they
kind
do
of
run train rides.
Yeah. From
when
Utica,
everything's open.
Yeah. From Utica up, I think even past Old Forge. And there's another train company does the same on the eastern side. And that rail, in fact, we've discussed before, that rail line, the one we saw yesterday and the one we're talking about from Utica to Old Forge, was the rail line. Let's go back to an old story of ours of the death of Grace. And that was the rail line they took up to where she was murdered. Yep.
Oh boy.
So, yeah, nice little tie-in to one we did before. Anywho, so... But then, like I said, they were mining and things were going well. And in 1857, because they kept having that titanium dioxide appear and it was very difficult to remove, the Adirondack Iron Works went, we can't, the cost of production is too much, and closed shop.
Yeah, the cost of extracting whatever that ore was, material that they couldn't use in the ore or leave it, or even refine it out later on, it had to come out right away in the process in order to make it iron ore, and that's became prohibitive. The cost of that became very prohibitive, and so
the town was abandoned.
The first closing.
Yep, the town was abandoned, and the town of Adirondack, or Mcintyre, some people called it named after the founder, was left to the woods. Now, 20 years later. Lumbering becomes a big business up there. And also private hunting and fishing clubs become big business up there. And a large private fishing game club organized in 1876 and was called the Preston Ponds Club, named after the three ponds that are just lie north of Lake Henderson. And this club leased land from the Adirondack Iron and Steel Company, which had originally been the Adirondack Iron Works, so they had now changed the name. So they were leasing this land where the former town was on for their hunting and fishing club. And this became so popular that in 1877 the club was reorganized and became the Adirondack Club, and then the entire tract was leased from the original owners of the ironworks. In 1898, the club reorganized again and became the Tawas Club. And the headquarters was north of Lake Sanford and near the site of the Upper Works. And so this is a very popular hunting and fishing club up there. And they basically are leasing the land where this former iron company's town was on.
So timber harvesting and tourism. Basically,
now,
community.
We're talking about hunting and fishing. And that's going to lead us to an event that we will cover in more detail later this season. But on September 6, 1901, the president at the time, President McKinley, was in Buffalo visiting the Pan American Exposition, in which he was shot by an assassin, and we'll go into more detail later in the season about the assassination attempt. Theodore Roosevelt, the vice president, he was over on this island at Lake Champlain when he got the news that McKinley had been shot. He takes off. He's trying to get to Buffalo now, and he gets so far. He gets it to New York, and he's told, oh, no, McKinley's fine. He's not dead. He looks like he's going to be pull through. So Roosevelt decides, well, the rest of his family is up in, guess where? Tawas Club. They're hunting fishing. So he's like, hey, I'm going to go up there. There's this guy that, was a guide for him years ago. He thought, hey, I'll go meet up this guy again. We'll go hiking and do some hunting. It'll be great. Okay. Didn't waste my trip. President's fine. Good. So he gets up to the club,
Mm-hmm.
and he's getting ready to go mountain climbing with this guide, and they're up at Lake Colden at this point. So now they're going in, and they're going to try to do some of the mountain climbing. They're up at Lake Colden, and the weather's bad, so they kind of get stuck there. And Mrs. Roosevelt and the kids go back to the club, right? The vice president, and they start going to Mount Marcy, which is the tallest mountain in the Adirondacks, which is the tallest mountain in New York, okay? Right? And they get to the top, and the views, and I think there's a lot of hikers that do this hike, and that do the 46ers who can relate. They get to the top of Mount Marcy, and it's covered in clouds. They can't see anything. Now, here's the problem. McKinley's health takes a turn for the worse at this point.
He starts to fail.
He became septic and was dying at this point. So a message gets to Roosevelt. The guide Harrison Hall was sent to deliver the message to the vice president, and preparations were made to arrange for relays of drivers to carry Roosevelt from the club, Tawas Club, to the train in North Creek, New York.
Okay.
All right. And so the Roosevelt comes down, gets the news, and they were at Lake Tier of the Clouds is where they find it, which is also the source of the Hudson River. Nice little trivia bit there.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where he gets the news that the president's dying. He's got to get his butt to Buffalo now.
Oh, yeah.
So Roosevelt, of course, his saying was, "Gentlemen, I must return to the clubhouse at once." Or perhaps he said, complicated. Let's pack up and go. He read the note calmly, finished his lunch. So he obviously knew there was urgency, but he also knew we better get some food in him. So they walked 12 miles in 3 hours. I'm impressed. We do 2 miles usually in an hour.
Yeah.
So 12 miles in 3 hours, I am impressed. And so they get back to the club. He leaves the next day. And then he gets, David Hunter was the superintendent of the Tawas Club, drove down the first leg of the relay with Roosevelt. They were in what were called, let me find the note. It's a certain type of wagon that became famous in the Adirondacks. I'm sorry, folks. This is what we usually call
it. Was it some kind of buckboard, was it?
A buckboard, thank you. Yeah, it was a buckboard wagon. Now
that's the roughest wagon you could ever ride on. I'm telling you.
Yeah. So he's riding in these buckboard wagons for relays of drivers trying to get him to the train station to get him to Buffalo. All right. This also gives you an idea what they were having to deal with up there. So
imagine this rain coming down.
Yeah.
The roads are still navigable, but they've got deep ruts in them from all of the runoff.
Yeah.
Being beat down by the rain. It's all muddy.
Mm-hmm.
And because we're talking about, there's probably not even a layer of gravel laid down on this road.
Probably
so
not.
It's very, very, very rough. And I mean, we are talking, early 20th century.
So he's making this frantic run in these horrible wagons. To give you an idea, imagine a covered wagon without the cover on it.
Well, the first relay was a 10-mile stretch of this stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's muddy, it's raining, and time of year it's probably sleet. I mean, it's not a pleasant ride at all.
No.
So,
not a sunny ride at all.
Yeah. So the second leg was driven by Orrin Kellogg, and who was a resident of Minerva and cousin of Secretary of State Frank Kellogg. And I guess Roosevelt had forgotten his raincoat, so Kellogg gave him his own raincoat at that point. 2 hours and 20 minutes later, sometime around 2 in the morning, Roosevelt arrived at Aden Lair, 9 miles closer to North Creek. The final leg was driven by Mark Crowan, a proprietor of Aden Lair, who had been informed by the vice president's private secretary that McKinley had died at 2:15 a.m. So
So, by the time he gets through the final leg, he discovers that he's got to be sworn in.
Yeah. So, Krohn Roosevelt, he covered 16-mile distance down the mountain. Okay. Well, let me back up. I missed a note here. Okay. So Cronin had just informed Roosevelt that McKinley had died. So they take the last leg, which was 16 miles down the mountain in an hour and 41 minutes. So this is pretty impressive. This is not going down that stretch of road and it's nicely black-topped and been... No, this is a winding mountain road in the night, in the rain. And
reportedly, Teddy was holding out the lamp.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they possibly see.
And they said no one had... After that, no one could beat his time. So this guy was pushing those horses down that mountain.
Oh, that's for sure.
And I'm surprised they made it, really. Krohn stated that Mr. Roosevelt was one of the nerviest men he ever saw, and when he showed the team in a dangerous place, Roosevelt responded, "If you're not afraid, I am not. Push ahead." So they finally get to North Creek, getting on the wagon and showing no signs of fatigue. I'm reading this directly from these notes here, which was the Theodore Roosevelt's midnight ride. I'm just going to read it directly. Getting out of the wagon and showing no signs of fatigue, Roosevelt took the steps up to the train platform, 2 at a time. He had just as he'd done on the Capitol steps in Albany when he was governor. Only then did Mr. Loeb inform him of the president's death. Although Krohn knew the president had died, he did not tell Roosevelt earlier because he did not want to add to the vice president's anxiety. Roosevelt hurried across the platform. Sorry about that, folks. Roosevelt hurried across the platform, stepped into a special car, and was immediately under motion. That afternoon, Roosevelt took the oath of office in Buffalo, becoming the 26th President of the United States. So there you go. Mm-hmm. That is pretty impressive. And
well, he never returned to the area, but continued to correspond with Mike Cronin over the years.
Yep. And like I said, that is from an article called Theodore Roosevelt's Midnight Ride by Joan Aldrich. We've got to give credit where credit's due. It's a really good breakdown of what happened. So that is one of the most famous things that happened in this town. Well, at this point, wasn't a town.
Yeah, they were still lumbering and
hunting and fishing up there. But then, 40 years later, something happens. 40 years later, well, what happened in 1940? We're going to war. Basically, we haven't gone to war yet. That'll be happening shortly, but things are happening. All right. So the titanium dioxide, which closed down the mine in the 1850s, was what people wanted. War was going. They needed the titanium dioxide. So now the government was like, hey, remember that mine up in the Adirondacks? They got plenty of it up there. So now they're starting to build the infrastructure back up to that mine, and they got a railroad built, and they allowed National Lead Industries to reopen the mine.
Yeah. Yeah, because that titanium dioxide provided sufficient motivation for them to reopen that, because they were looking for a domestic source of the titanium dioxide to use for the war effort. So the region became of interest again. Right.
So they reopened a town there. This new community was first known as the Lower Works, but then became Tahawus. Oh, I just mispronounced it. Tahawus. And by 1945, it had 84 buildings. Now, some of the buildings left over from the previous village were being used. They were able to extract 40 million tons of titanium before it ceased operations in 1989. So, as ghost towns go, this is a fairly recent ghost town. So now it's abandoned again. But it really wasn't abandoned, though.
There you go.
No, we do have to say, that in 1963 there was another interesting twist that happened to this town. So they built the original town there, in the same place they had built the first town, Adirondack. Now, Mcintyre Development had built the housing for 180 families and 160 men, plus they had a school, a fire department, YMCA, bowling alley, movie theater, barber shop, coffee shop. This was a town. This was big. Mm-hmm. But, let me get here. But in 1963, the Mcintyre Development started moving buildings. They would jack them up, load them on flatbeds of trucks, and then drive them down to Newcomb. Okay? So, before recording this, I just watched a quick video. You can find it on YouTube. They're showing them moving the town. And it is a convoy of these flatbeds with the buildings on them. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really amazing. By the end of 1963, 84 houses, 2 churches, 1 store, 5 apartment buildings had been moved. So, they all moved to Newcomb. All right?
Okay. Now,
it basically doubled the size of Newcomb. Now, remember, this is half of the town of Tahawus coming down. Mm-hmm. They're moving it here. The town that once had 1 store now had 2. Where there was 1 church, they have 2. Mm-hmm. Actually, they had 3 when the move was done. The only thing that really wasn't moved was the YMCA. Because it was concrete. So.
Right.
But that's interesting because they moved those people down there in 1963. But when the operation did cease in 1988, or 1989, mm-hmm. There was a bunkhouse up there. I mean, there were still some buildings. The whole town wasn't moved, but it was just enough to keep the workers who had to be on site. So, yeah. Mm-hmm. And people actually remember it was hard work, but the people who worked there remembered it quite fondly. It wasn't the best job in the world, but they paid you well and took care of you. Which, if you're working in a situation like that, yeah.
And dangerous work, too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Mm-hmm. The termination of the mining activities by N&L Industries mm-hmm. in '89. Now the site is, once again deserted, and there are mine pits there.
Yes.
And which are purportedly 1,000 feet or more deep.
Yeah.
And they're full of water,
mm-hmm.
which is just creepy. But then there are also these 300-foot high massive tailing piles.
Mm-hmm.
That sit between the mine pits.
Right.
And that was part of the process, of refining. And so all that's still there.
Yeah. And what's nice is it's not protected. I mean, mm-hmm. there is still, there are still companies up there mining, and there are still companies up there doing productions. So the entire mm-hmm. area it's not totally abandoned. So there are places up there you cannot go because there's active industry going on. There's active manufacturing and mining mm-hmm. and whatever. Mm-hmm. But the actual town you can go to, and you can visit and hike through. And
well, they're still pulling titanium dioxide out of the earth up there, aren't they?
They are. Yes, they are.
Not so much iron anymore, but
no. And the town is now protected by a
Tawas Tract Open Space Institute.
Yep, the Open Space is it Institute or
Institute? Yeah. The Tawas Tract
Initiative.
Open Space Institute. Yeah, the initiative. Right.
The Open Space Initiative.
Okay.
Yes.
Open Space Initiative.
Yes, they they now control majority of the tract that's not being used,
mm-hmm.
and
where the 3,500 mm-hmm. or 4,000 acres that are remaining of the town area is protected.
So they actually protect 212 acres of the area, which includes a lot of the structures, mm-hmm. and then they've also opened trails up there. So. And you can actually go to see the 1856 blast furnace as well. That's mm-hmm. one thing. So they not only protected the area, but they protected a lot of the historic parts of it as well.
Right, absolutely.
So that makes it really interesting because it's a ghost town, And if you're into urban exploring, yeah, go ahead. They've opened it, the parts they've opened up to, you can get to and see. We were just recently in a place kind of like that, Montezuma, New York. They have a little park there, and in the park there's an old paper mill. There are old parts of the canal, and there's even parts of the old Clinton Ditch are in that area. And it's neat because, yes, it's a park, and you go hiking, and they've got these great trails, and then you come across the aqueduct.
The first canal built in New York State was Clinton's Ditch.
Yeah.
So you're talking like 1812.
Yeah.
Something, beginning then. Mm-hmm.
So that's another example on a smaller scale than what OSI did. Mm-hmm. And so OSI did the same thing with Tahawus. You go up there, you can go visit it, you can see these buildings, you can explore these buildings, and you can check on YouTube. A lot of people do it. They go up there with their families and their dogs, and they're in and out of these buildings, and you see a lot of the history. And it's not just preserved because, hey, this is a cool little ghost town. Mm-hmm. I think it's cool because you got the Teddy Roosevelt connection as well. Oh, yeah. There is it is strange because it's just this tiny little town. Well, twice was a company town. Yeah. It wasn't even just a trade town or anything. No, this was a company town. This was where people who worked for the company came and lived. And then you got the connection with Teddy Roosevelt in this small little speck up near the headwaters of the Hudson River, up near the high peaks. I mean, it's amazing. A little bit of little space and a lot of history happened there. So
a lot can go on in one spot.
Yep. And if you want to camp there, they got campgrounds and they let people kayak there. Yeah, so it's nice.
There's a lot up there aside from just the ghost town, which you can safely spelunk around.
Yep.
If you're into urban exploring and stuff like that and looking at old buildings and are interested in their history, you can still go up there.
Yeah.
And
but you don't have to ride up on a buckboard wagon.
Online content, videos.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. You don't have to ride up on a buckboard wagon
you don't.
or mountain climb to get up there. You can take a car up a nicely paved road to get there now. So,
absolutely.
But like I said, there are still areas.
Unless you want that experience.
Yeah, then you can. There's plenty of hiking trails up there. You could do that.
Or you could.
You could ride a horse up there if you want.
Exactly. Yeah.
If you want. Yeah.
There are people who provide horses up there. Yeah. I suppose you could find a wagon too. If you want the full experience.
So they did say one of the buildings they did save was the McNaughton College. The McNaughton Cottage, which was the place where Roosevelt was staying when the news came. So, there you go. Yeah.
Yes, and wasn't all this preservation that wasn't just a national effort? Wasn't it also done under the aegis of Governor Pataki at the time?
Governor Pataki, yeah, I can't find the note on it right now, but yeah, he did do. I think he made sure that it got saved. And yeah, I'm sorry. This, like I said, this is part 3 you cut out, guys. Here it is. Oh, I found it. So yeah, Governor Pataki really did help them get this protected.
Get going.
Yeah. So yeah, it's a neat little place. Like I said, check out YouTube. There's a lot of people who do explorations up there. And I think it's a safe urban exploration. You can go there, check out it, and then check out all the history. I mean, just think if they hadn't closed their operation in 1856, how important that would have been less than 10 years later for the Union. I mean, just think about that, So, yeah. All right, so that is the story of the ghost town, Tahawus, and I keep mispronouncing it.
What about the people? What about the ghost stories about Tahawus, though?
There are no ghost stories, really, except it being a ghost town. And
weren't there any, I'm sure there was some deaths out there. Come on.
Yeah, but I looked it up. Nobody really mentions any. There's no, if they do ghost walks, I think they're doing more of the history of there. And Teddy Roosevelt's Midnight Ride, and But as for like any, like, well, was there killers up there, or was there like ghost hauntings or anything? There's nothing. I couldn't find anything.
Well, there's this story about a one David Henderson, who was charged with management of the Adirondack Iron Works in 1838, and while he was hiking around one of the desolate areas on a spot on September 3rd, 1845, Henderson was killed as a result of an accidental gunshot wound.
Oh, I missed this one.
He'd thrown down his knapsack and belt, which had the gun on it, and the hammer of the gun hit a rock and discharged the weapon.
Oof.
The duck hole, quote-unquote, where he was shot has since been called Calamity Pond.
Oh, okay. So you found something I didn't find.
Yeah.
Nice. So there is but does it say it's haunted?
Well, there's no reports of a haunting. They're not sure if David is still, walking around there.
It could be so embarrassed that happened. He just
so embarrassing. He just laid down and died.
Yeah, so we know ghosts. Okay, so you did find something.
I'm going to regale you with that. Yeah.
You did find something a little spooky to happen there. Yeah.
Well, 1845. You're talking the first revolvers, the first cap involved revolvers, and if you don't keep the hammer on an empty cylinder, resting on an empty cylinder, he obviously had his pistol fully loaded, and the hammer resting on one of the caps on the cylinder. So when he threw down the gun belt with his backpack and the hammer was struck by the rock, the force of that blow, it broke the cap, discharging it. And, yeah.
Okay.
So that's how that happens. So never fully load your 44 caliber 1851 Navy revolver. You always keep the hammer on an empty cylinder.
I'm
yeah, sure. You only get 5 shots out of it, but
Well, speaking of ghosts, I'm surprised people haven't seen Roosevelt racing down the road in that buckboard, holding the lantern in front of him and going.
It's such a harrowing experience for him. Probably. Yeah. Well, he was.
Well, but we're talking about Teddy Roosevelt,
The inflammable Teddy Roosevelt.
Who, when he did get shot, continued his speech.
You've just been shot, Mr. President. What are you going to do next? I'm going to give a speech.
Yeah. I mean, if this ride made him nervous, like they were saying,
I know.
Can you just imagine?
But then he's like, on.
Yeah, keep going.
Keep on going.
Yeah, we could go into a whole discussion about Teddy Roosevelt, and especially now in the day of the internet and how many memes, and he is the toughest president. This guy didn't put up, and hey, if it wasn't for Teddy, a lot of those lands that we took advantage of, especially with COVID, the national parks and all that, wouldn't be around. So yes, Teddy, he's got this meme thing going, we're being the toughest president. But man, if it wasn't for him, a lot of the wild wouldn't be saved.
Okay, well, if you want to learn more about Tahawus, you can still see some of the real artifacts. They're at the old village. That's a stop by the Newcomb Historical Society.
Newcomb, New York.
Okay, Newcomb, New York. Stop by there, next to the building, next to the town hall. And there's some really great stuff, like a set of lockers that are still covered in the iron and titanium dust. And,
neat.
Bowling pins and trophies from the bowling alley of the YMCA. And a T-shirt from the YMCA of that time. And they have photos depicting the houses. You can compare and contrast the photos of the houses at the historical place with Tawas itself, and compare and contrast how things have deteriorated and that sort of thing.
May I make an apology to our listeners? Did not plan on the fire trucks going by. Did not plan on Lloyd jumping again. So sorry if you missed any of that.
It's kind of in the raw here.
Yeah. All right. I think we need to wrap up now. So, again, that was the story of a ghost town in the Adirondacks. Tahawus. There are other ghost towns, and maybe we'll talk about them. Like I said, we've talked about Happy Valley. This is Tahawus. And I don't think you need to make up any stories about this place. It's got cool enough stories as it is.
The creepy ghost town in New York, which is the stuff of nightmares made of, some people say, but
it's not. It's not. It's a kind of a cool little piece of history. All right. So
thank you for listening to our ghastly podcast.
Goodbye. Thank you for listening to Unearthly Upstate. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, Patreon, and on our webpage. We are also on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Spreaker, Stitcher, Podbean, Google Podcasts, and CastBox. Please like, share, and review on your favorite platform. Unearthly Upstate is an Animator Liar production. The show is produced by Mari and Matt Manette, with purring provided by Honey and Lloyd. Research and writing by Mari Manette. Music is by Kevin MacLeod, licensed under Creative Commons Attribution 3.0 license. Unless otherwise stated in the episode, the places mentioned in the broadcast are not paid or contact us for any type of promotion. Please check out our webpage for credit and sources for the episode. Thank you.